The Forgotten Village. Rosemary Grey Cozy Mysteries, Book 3, by Tracy Donley. Narrated by Mia Hutchinson-Shaw. 1. Rosemary Grey had never felt more content. She took another sip of hot coffee, pulled the soft quilt closer around her shoulders, and inhaled deeply. There was a hint of spring in the air, that indescribable mix of tiny green shoots pushing up through the soil, of snow melting, of new beginnings. Even her cat Smudge was friskier than usual, happy to be outside in the morning sunshine after spending the past few months curled up by the fire. At the moment, she was carefully examining a beetle that was hobbling across the porch, and Rosemary breathed a sigh of relief when the beetle successfully tumbled off the side without injury. It would be April before the last snow fell, and the countryside burst forth into flowers and grasses. But even now, with the end of March in sight, winter was most definitely on the wing in Paperwick, Connecticut. "You look like one of those women in the movies," Rosemary's best friend Jack said as he came out onto her porch. What does that mean?" asked Rosemary with a laugh. Jack took the second rocking chair on the porch and cupped his hands around his coffee mug. "Oh, you know, you're sitting out here, that dreamy look on your face, all glowy and pretty and happy." He paused and gave her a grin. "And in love?" Rosemary swatted Jack, then settled back in with her coffee. What could she say? He was right. She'd only been dating Seth Maguire, Dr. Seth Maguire, newly appointed head of the anthropology department at Paperwick University, since the fall. But at 30 years old, Rosemary knew a good man when she met one, and Seth Maguire was a very good man. Jack, of course, took full credit for the match since he'd introduced them. The three of them were colleagues at the university, with Jack and Rosemary teaching English literature and history, respectively. "Hey, here comes our daily forecast," said Jack, getting to his feet and leaning out over the porch railing as his husband, Charlie Stewart, jogged up. Rosemary and Jack still got a kick out of the fact that Charlie, a best-selling novelist and armchair meteorologist, was so serious about fitness. She and Jack had always tried to avoid anything that made them sweaty or crampy or uncomfortable and considered a brisk walk across the university campus to be exercise enough for them. They'd been trying to do better since New Year's, taking walks around the farm whenever they remembered to, but somehow their power walk always morphed into a stroll as they got lost in conversation. "We're definitely going to be getting a preview of the upcoming spring this afternoon," said Charlie, reaching over the railing to take a sip of Jack's coffee. "Those are cirrus clouds way up there, and there's no rain in the forecast for today." "Excellent," said Jack, taking his mug back. "Jog on, my good man." Charlie gave them a little salute and disappeared around the other side of the house. The porch that Jack and Rosemary sat on ran the whole length of Rosemary's cottage and overlooked a large pond or a small lake. No one could decide which it was. And its surface was glassy and peaceful that morning. Just around the circle of the pond was Jack and Charlie's gorgeous old restored farmhouse. A narrow road encircled the pond so that it was easy on any given morning for Jack to stroll next door to Rosemary's cottage, or vice versa. The friends generally met up at one house or the other for coffee in the morning, wine in the evening, or both, most days. The farm, known these days as the old Clark farm, was a little slice of history in itself. It had been the homestead of a family by the name of Clark for generations. When one of the Clark daughters, the beguiling Hortense, married Jonathan Gallo in the 1600s, he took control of the land and it became the Gallo farm. Through a twisty chain of events, Hortense, who, along with her sister Mercy, worked as a midwife and healer in the area, had been accused of witchcraft and was subsequently murdered. Jack and Charlie, both fascinated with the New England witch trials, had happened upon the farm and instantly fallen in love with it. It was a true haven, with its pond, lake, woods, orchard, dilapidated farmhouse, caretaker's cottage, and crumbling barn. They'd lovingly renovated the house and the cottage that Rosemary now lived in, then the old barn. Their latest project had been the restoration of the gatehouse at the front of the property, which they'd undertaken with the help and guidance of their trusted contractor and jack-of-all-trades, Bert Ander, and his new wife, Ingrid Clark Ander. The two had fallen in love and wed in a bit of a whirlwind in December, but as they were both well into their 60s, they didn't want to waste any time. Ingrid was a descendant of Hortense and Mercy, and in honor of the Clark family, who had inhabited their land for so long, Jack and Charlie had officially renamed the place the Clark Farm. Jack said Gallo Farm had always sort of given him the creeps anyways. They'd also invited Ingrid and Bert to move into the little gatehouse once the renovations were complete, and the two were just getting settled into their new home in time for spring. This happy event marked the return of the Clark family to the land, and Rosemary continued to be overwhelmed by Jack and Charlie's generosity. She herself couldn't have imagined settling down in one place a year before, but now, to her surprise and delight, the cozy cottage and a hometown so small it wasn't included on most maps had turned out to be exactly what she needed. "So, we'll wrap up Chapter 15 today," said Jack, sipping his coffee and reaching down to scoop Smudge up. He scratched the little tortoiseshell kitten behind the ears. "Yep," said Rosemary. "Do you realize we're halfway done with the book?" "Cause for celebration," said Jack. "Let's bake something good tonight. Oh, let's bake my mom's almond sheet cake." "Oh my gosh, yes, I love that cake." Mrs. Stone's almond sheet cake was dense and moist and covered with a creamy, nutty frosting. Jack's mom had always made it for celebratory occasions, and its only flaw was that you always wanted one more bite, even if you were stuffed. The book that Rosemary and Jack were writing together was about the Clark sisters, Hortense and Mercy. In it, the story of a period in the village of Paperwick's history that had been swept under the rug was finally being aired out, and the sisters, and others like them, vindicated and brought to light as the heroes they truly were. Rosemary and Jack had actually bonded over history back in college when they'd first met. Rosemary had been earning her undergrad degree in history, Jack in literature. They'd remained fast friends through grad school and beyond, and now considered one another to be as dear as any family member could be. They, along with Rosemary's significant other, Seth Maguire, taught at Paperwick University, home of the Fighting Trout, and, as luck would have it, a pipe in their building, Langner Hall, had burst. The necessary repairs would be made by the afternoon, but meanwhile, they had an unexpected Wednesday morning free. That was why they were still sitting on Rosemary's porch, sipping coffee and shooting the breeze an hour later. "We really should get to work now," said Rosemary, standing and stretching. "We can work a little on the manuscript before we head over to school." "I think we've consumed sufficient caffeine," agreed Jack. The phone, which lay on the side table next to the sofa, was just ringing as Rosemary pushed open the French doors that led into her living room. Smudge ran in ahead of her, and Jack followed behind. She grabbed the phone and glanced at the screen. "Uh-oh," she said, glancing at Jack. "It's Hermione." Hermione Webb was head of the history department, and thus Rosemary's boss at Paperwick University. After a short conversation that involved Rosemary saying, "Of course," and "No problem," she clicked off the phone and turned to Jack. "Sorry, I'll have to go into school this morning after all." "But why?" whined Jack. "There's the broken pipe and the torrential flooding in our building." "Torrential flooding?" Rosemary raised a brow. "Well, I mean, there is unpleasant dampness, and it might be slippery." "But only on the second floor where our offices and classrooms are located," Rosemary said. "They need me to fill in for Dr. Bitters. She didn't show up to work today." "But she offices on the second floor, too." "But her morning class is on the first." "Darn." "Can we still make the cake tonight?" "Absolutely." "Good. I'll see you later at school." Rosemary rinsed out her coffee cup and hurried upstairs to change from her sweats into something more presentable, and Jack let himself out.